Due to the anecdotal nature of oral accounts, the identity of the protagonist in these events is uncertain. The story emerged in San Juanes, a charming town where, they say, things happen that could drive a rational person to paranoia. In this series of stories, I invite you to discover what occurs in that town and whether it justifies its bad reputation.
That fateful afternoon, I was in my apartment studying. I was already tired, so I went out of the building to get some air. At the front door, I saw several women talking. I assumed about something bad since one of them was crying. I asked them what was happening, and they told me that Professor Lopez's daughter had been run over. I ran towards the place where they said it happened. I ran and ran until, as I turned a corner, I saw a crowd of people in the middle of the street. I couldn't see, so I slipped through until I reached the center, and there she was. There was a lot of blood, so much that it reached the curbs. Someone had put a white sheet over the body. Some of those present said that her head was shattered and that the body had been lying on the floor for an hour, waiting for the forensics to come and pick her up. The wake was held the next day at the professor's house. There were a lot of people since the professor was very loved. I remember seeing him glued to the coffin, crying and running his hand over it, asking God why he had taken his only daughter. I approached him and told him I was sorry, but he didn't even notice me. He just kept hugging the coffin. A coffin that, by the way, didn't let the girl's face be seen. They took her to the cemetery that same afternoon, a rainy afternoon with a dark sky. I remember it took 3 men to control the professor, since he, when the time came to bury the girl, didn't want to let go of the casket. It was a truly sad scene. Sometime later, I found out that Professor Lopez hadn't gone to the university to teach for a week, so I went to see him to check how he was doing. I thought I would find a dejected man, but for some reason he looked in good spirits, if not happy. I asked him what had him so cheerful. He looked me in the eye and said, "I'm happy because tonight I'm going to talk to my daughter. She and I are going to have a conversation." 5 seconds after recovering from the chill I got from hearing that, in a somewhat sarcastic tone, I asked him how he would do such a thing. He, still looking me in the eye, smiled and looked towards the table. I approached it and saw a small board with the alphabet and the numbers 0 to 9, a half moon and all that. I had never seen one in person, but I knew what it was. I asked him if he knew how to use that thing. He said he knew enough and invited me to come back at night to accompany him in the ritual, but I told him no because I had things to do. The truth is, I could hardly believe that someone like Professor Lopez believed in that kind of thing, but apparently his daughter's death had traumatized him more than I thought. 2 days later, I went to his house to return some physics books he had lent me a while ago. When I arrived, I rang the doorbell several times but got no answer. I grabbed the doorknob, turned it, and realized the door was open. I didn't want to go in without permission, but I also didn't want to come back with those heavy books, so I went in. Inside, everything was very dark. I called out to the professor several more times but got no response. I put the books on a table. Suddenly I thought he might be asleep or had gotten sick, so I went to the stairs leading to the second floor and started climbing slowly since it was completely dark. When I got upstairs, I saw a long hallway with 3 rooms. I walked towards the closest one. The door was closed. I opened it a little and called the professor. When I didn't get an answer, I opened the door completely. There was no one there. The place was nicely arranged, and from the decor, I understood it was the girl's room. I closed the door and kept walking towards the second room, where he wasn't either. Then I continued to the third and last door, but just as I was about to open it, I heard something coming from downstairs. It was footsteps. I thought it was the professor, so I walked back down the dark hallway, and just before going down the stairs, I heard the footsteps again and stopped. It seemed like someone walking back and forth. I thought it was the professor, but no, something wasn't right. The sound of the footsteps was very strange. The steps were abnormal. They were happening in lapses of 3 seconds. It was like now a step would be heard, and 3 seconds later the other would be heard, but with different force. I called out to the professor one more time but got no answer. At that moment that someone started coming up the stairs straight towards me, I started feeling afraid, and not because he was coming up the stairs towards where I was, but because he was doing it in such a stealthy way that I got the impression he didn't want me to realize it. I didn't know who it was, nor did I stay to find out, so I went into the girls' room and locked the door. I heard the footsteps reach the hallway and stop in front of the door. The doorknob started shaking. Whoever was there tried to open it, but since it was locked, apparently they couldn't. A minute later, the abnormal footsteps moved to the end of the hallway. I heard the third bedroom door open, then close. I assumed that whoever it was had entered the room, so I took the opportunity and left the room I was in. I went down the stairs as fast as I could, and without looking back, I ran out of the house. Several days later, I was in my room fixing the TV that didn't want to turn on. At that moment, I heard some screams coming from the street. I went to the window and saw people running. I had no idea what was happening, so I left the apartment and walked in the direction the people were going. I walked until I saw a crowd in the street pushing to get into Professor Lopez's house. In front of the door there was an armed man who was practically struggling with part of the crowd that wanted to enter the house. I thought maybe the professor had committed suicide or something, but no. After asking around, I found out it was a rumor that had brought those curious people there. What they were saying was that a subject, no one knows who, how or when, was able to see what he described as a being with a devilish appearance walking in the last room on the second floor. When I heard that, I felt a chill that went down to the soles of my feet. And it's not that I'm a believer in that kind of thing, but I was in the house and I encountered someone, and just thinking that there was even a small possibility that whoever it was wasn't the professor still gives me nightmares.